things have changed this last week. Things have shifted. And it wasn't just because of Charlie Kirk, that one event. It was because of the stacking of events. And yes, Charlie Kirk being assassinated was definitely a peak of the week, or I guess you could say a valley of the week. But it was really the building of events. It's what has been building for, honestly, the last 5 years, since 2020, and really what has been building before that. I mean, I don't know how big we would want to really talk about like the history of what's unfolded in America, what I remember growing up in the 90s in terms of the battle for truth, the battle for our minds that has been specifically playing out on the public stage, in media, in our schools, and really just in narrative in general. And today I want to talk about something that I have been asked a lot by a lot of you guys. And to be honest, I don't feel equipped to answer this question. I've joked about this before when I answer parenting questions over on Instagram, because people ask me parenting questions kind of regularly. And every time I'm kind of like, all right, well, I'm a mom of 2 under 5, so I really don't know what I'm talking about. But the questions keep coming. And obviously, these are things that I think about, like everything that has happened in the last week, in the last 5 years, they haven't just been things that I'm processing for myself. They're things that I'm processing for the future of my children. And the questions that you guys send me, the comments that you send me, clearly say that you guys are thinking about the same thing. You're wondering the same thing. And I'm actually kind of thinking that maybe you're not asking me these questions so much from a place of like wanting advice, but maybe more so from a place of just wondering what a fellow Christian conservative mom is also thinking in these turbulent times. I do want to say before I hop in, if you like these kinds of commentary videos, these kind of thoughtful videos, would you give this video a thumbs up and maybe even leave me a comment down below, because it helps to not only support my channel and support this video, but it just lets me know that you guys like seeing these. So yeah, one huge thing that is said to me or asked of me regularly is, how do I feel about raising kids in such crazy times like this? How do I plan on instilling my kids with wisdom and truth in a world that seemingly hates truth? And there's kind of 2 parts to this. I think the first thing that I want to say is that I think that people can tend to believe what I believe is a fallacy, and that is that times right now are tougher, are harder than the times of the past. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe there is going to be an end times in this world. I do believe, as a Christian, as a believer in Jesus Christ, that there is going to be an end to this world, that this world is not going to go on forever. I will say, I don't have like a super clear eschatological belief. I don't have, neither Dan and I both, we don't have a specific end times theology or eschatology, that's what that means, that we really subscribe to. We have kind of leanings towards things, but it's not super clear for us, and it's not for a lack of not trying to understand, not trying to study. It's because we really just don't know what we exactly believe. But I want to be honest about that. It kind of feels weird admitting that. I feel like most Christians have a really specific end times belief. But I want to say this because I think there has to be other people like me who feel the same way, who don't necessarily know exactly what they believe about the end times. And I want to say that I don't think you have to, in order to parent with intentionality, in order to try to build the best future and instill truth in your children. I don't think that we have to know for sure what we believe about the end times. I don't even think that that's necessarily an integral part of the Christian faith. I heard my friend Lee actually say this in one of her videos recently, and she does have a clear belief in regards to her end times theology, it seems, but she used wording that I really appreciated, and I was like, that's what I believe. I've heard other people say this before, but when she said it, it really stuck to me. And it was this idea, this thought that we have been in the end times since Jesus ascended back to heaven. Like the countdown began. And that's what I believe. I believe that this earth will not last forever. I believe that we are waiting for Jesus to return. But that being said, back to what I was saying before, turbulent times. I do think that people, believers, but I mean, people in general, I think we can fall into this habit of thinking that we have it harder than previous generations, that it's more difficult for us than anyone before us. And I don't believe that. In fact, in a lot of ways, I actually think it's the opposite, depending on the metrics that you're using to measure life and what makes life difficult or hard. And so I think that when we allow ourselves to fall into this trap of things are so much harder now, I can't believe I'm having to raise kids in this time, in this day and age, it's a very depressing viewpoint. And I just think it's a flat out untrue viewpoint. I mean, there are places and people throughout history that have been through such horrifying things. There are places in the world right now where people, if you're not living in a country like I am in America, a developed country that has pretty protective laws and is relatively safe, where people are going through horrifying, horrible things, particularly Christians. I heard something the other day. I haven't done any fact checking, so go ahead and fact check it. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I heard someone make the claim that Christian persecution now is at a spike, an all-time high, basically, where Christians are being murdered, are being persecuted for their faith throughout the world. And that's, as a general statement, I'm not talking about the chaos we saw last week, whatever unfolded with Charlie Kirk. We don't know all of the details of that hit. But I'm talking just civilian mass persecution. We're not living through that right now. Yes, we are in what people refer to as a culture war. And I do think that terminology is good. People will use the phrase happy warrior, that you need to be a happy warrior in the culture war. And I do agree with that. There is a side of me, a softer side of me, that just doesn't like that terminology, that feels like it's better to just think of there's light and darkness, and we are to be light in the dark, and we just keep pursuing truth and shining light and praying for the Lord's joy and strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The strength of the Lord is my joy. That's kind of a side note. I kind of just flipped a Bible verse, but that's something that I feel like God spoke to me actually years ago when I visited Israel. And I think that that's the thing, being strong and having joy and having the joy from the Lord is what makes us strong, and our strength is our joy. I think I'm over-explaining this, whatever, you get it. But point being, raising kids in turbulent times like these, I think times have always been turbulent because we have always been fallen as people. There has always been sin. So how do we raise kids in a culture that seemingly hates truth? I think that the first thing that we do is we work to anchor children, anchor ourselves. That's part of it too, right? We're trying to raise kids that are anchored in truth. Are we anchored in truth? I actually think that's a huge part of it. Are we taking care of the log in our own eye before we point out the speck in someone else's? And I know that's different than raising your children, but it's not, in the sense that I think part of how we raise our kids to value truth is we need to value truth. We have to keep our lives, our minds, and our hearts anchored in the Word, in biblical truths that present themselves in the Word. I talk about this a lot in regards to homeschooling, that I just think that part of what makes homeschooling so awesome is you are essentially the ultimate guidance counselor. This is how I see it. I don't see homeschooling as you need to be the teacher of everything. You better know how to do everything. You better know everything about everything, because nobody does. Teachers who teach in school, they don't know everything about everything. They are following curriculum. So this is not to bash teachers, because I think it's a talent, and there are a lot of great teachers out there who care about their students. But I don't think it's that hard, in the sense that they're following curriculum, they're caring for their students, and they're teaching them what they know and what the curriculum is teaching them to teach their children. So what I think is so amazing about homeschooling and parenting in general, this is there's a connection here, is this idea of being the ultimate guidance counselor, looking and paying attention at your children, paying attention to what their strengths are, their weaknesses, what they seem to be passionate about, the things that they want to pursue, the areas that they're really struggling in. And I see that so clearly in regards to homeschooling, but part of why I'm so passionate about homeschooling is because I think that with homeschooling, you essentially have the ability to imitate life. I think homeschooling is actually life, depending on the path that your child goes down. I mean, even that statement, no, I just think homeschooling is life. I think that very rarely, like if you look at a school system, I've said this before, I'm hoping I'm not going to get off on too much of a tangent. You're not going to be sitting in a room with your peers that are your exact same age as an adult, having to ask to go to the bathroom, ask to go eat food. Like, it's just, I don't think it's actually the best reflection of what real life looks like. But I think homeschooling can be if you guide your children down a path towards, like I said, their passions. If you pay attention to their weaknesses and help supplement them with the things that they need to strengthen them in their weaknesses. And I think you get what I'm saying. It is the same thing with just parenting in general. I don't think that we can go on autopilot. I actually think that's one of the temptations for parents. Maybe it's not like an active temptation. I just mean I think it can be something we could fall into as parents if we send our kids away to school, is to assume on kind of autopilot mode that their education is being taken care of, that they're being directed in the right way. And I don't think that, especially in this day and age, right? Do we want to word it that way? I don't think that we are supposed to go on autopilot with our kids. And that's how I feel in regards to instilling truth in our children. I think that we cannot be on autopilot and just let the days and the months and the years go by and assume that they're going to just turn out just fine. Like, we have to, in my opinion, we have to walk hand in hand with our children through, well, first off, the Bible. Okay. I've been thinking a lot lately. I've been thinking for like the last few years, really ever since I became a parent, leading up to parenthood, that I think children can actually handle more emotionally and morally in terms of like information and stories than we give them credit for. I know personally for me, I have seen in my son the questions that he asks me in regards to morals, in regards to God, in regards to why God made things certain ways to play out that way with bad guys and good guys, and if he knew everything, and why did this happen that way? Just the questions that he asks are so profound. It's really been very humbling to me to see how his heart already yearns for truth and yearns for direction and to be shaped into knowing who God is and to have a grasp on what this life is that he's navigating. And I had kind of already developed that belief a few years ago, reading about the early settlers in America, like the Puritans, particularly the Puritans, but just different history books about early Americans, and really realizing that, yes, children's lives back in the day, the average lifespan was shorter. This is my understanding of it. The average lifespan was shorter because a lot of children didn't make it past childhood. So it shortened the average lifespan. Now, there's a whole big debate around that I'm not necessarily trying to have in this video. A lot of people think that is because of vaccines, that the lifespan is longer. That may be part of it, though you know that I believe that there are unintended consequences that come along with vaccinations. As well as I don't believe in the way that the technology is built. I'm trying to not go off on a tangent here. But I also think there are other reasons, including the wilderness being more tamed now, society being built up, the proper disposal of excrements, is that the word? Like pee and poop, we know how to like handle it now, access to fresh food, clean water, all of that stuff. There's a lot of reasons. But point being, because the average lifespan was shorter, because it was so common for children to pass away, I noticed in looking at a lot of these history books, reading a lot of these books, really wasn't reading, I was listening. You guys already know that I'm not a reader. I'm an audible person in general, except for cookbooks. I have like a whole pile of cookbooks from the library right now. Anyways, I realized that a lot of the conversations that these adults would have with their children regarding faith were very mature, they almost uncomfortably mature for me. It challenged my understanding and belief of what kids could handle hearing and talking about. And the questions that the children would ask in these books when they're relaying these conversations were just, challenging. That's the word that comes to my mind. They challenged my belief in as far as what children can handle in spiritual conversations around life and death. And so because of that, I kind of came to the opinion that I want to make sure that my kids hear Bible stories regularly. And some of them are too mature, but in general, a lot of them are very mature And I just kind of decided with Dan, obviously, that we're fine with that. It's the Bible. We believe that the Bible is truth and reflects humanity, human tendencies, both the good and the bad, and that we want our children to start learning these stories and tucking these morals of the story into their hearts and having their life to grapple with these morals. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but we want to guide them deliberately on their worldview. Now, this is another thing that I talked to someone on Instagram about the other day, or they were like berating me about, saying that basically I'm going to be brainwashing my kids. And a couple of funny things around that. My response, first off, was the fact that we don't plan on keeping our kids only exposed to biblical right-leaning Christian worldviews. Like at all, we plan on fully allowing our children to understand that people believe lots of different things. And we plan on hopefully understanding why people believe different things and walking through those things with our children and explaining them to them. And then also walking them through why we believe those worldviews are not true, why we don't subscribe to them, why we believe in a biblical Christian conservative worldview. But we want to be able to grapple through those things with them and not have the first time that they're ever exposed to these ideas be once we're like, bye, see ya, out into the world. And then in my imagination, this is kind of a random speculatory theory that I have, which doesn't even make sense, is that I think kids that are completely sheltered like that get into the real world, quote unquote, and then they maybe feel lied to, or they feel like these other worldviews or narratives are like, oh, that's the other half of this pie, like that's what's true. And it may automatically feel true to them because they were just never even exposed to these ideologies and why, in my worldview, these ideologies can be harmful. And that doesn't mean, once again, right? Children are going to grow up to be adults and they're going to choose the path they're going to go down. And it is what it is. We can't control our kids. And ultimately, I want my kids to know that I love them and I want to maintain relationship with them no matter what they decide. God willing, though, I am praying that they develop an intimate knowing and relationship of God, or with God and with Jesus, and that they learn from the Bible how to gain a moral structure to navigate their lives with. We plan on grappling with these other worldviews with them, or wrestling with these, through these thoughts, through these ideas, through these worldviews with them. That being said, when I posted that on Instagram, I actually got a lot of responses from people that I was like, that's totally valid, where people were like, and sorry if you hold this worldview, but also it just is what it is. People were like, though, if you were a more liberal, left-leaning person that was planning on raising them that way, they wouldn't be asking like, well, what about the Christian worldview? Are you going to make sure that they're exposed to the Christian worldview? And I was like, that's actually a really good point. And then someone else actually said, bro, you almost don't even have to try to explain that worldview to them, because that is the dominating worldview in the culture, in the media, in the school system, out in the world. So, and I totally agree with that. Now, granted, we live in an area that is at this point in time hyper conservative, very filled with Christians. I've never lived anywhere like this. I've never even been anywhere like this. It's actually really crazy. Who knows how long it'll stay this way, but that's the way it is right now. And that being said, that's something else that I think is important. I know that I just gave this whole spiel about exposing our children to other worldviews, but simultaneously, I think it's important, and this is where we go back to not parenting on autopilot. I think it's important to stay in tune with your child's heart, where their minds are at, where their heart is at, and essentially having age-appropriate conversations for your child at the time that it makes sense to have those conversations. Meaning, I don't think every child is ready for every conversation or every moral dilemma at the same age. I think that children in general should be sheltered for a certain period of time. And I don't know what that period of time is. That's where, once again, I think that not being an autopilot, being connected to your children and praying for discernment and wisdom is of the utmost importance, but I do think that children should be sheltered for a while. Now, what I mean by that, I'll always use this gardening analogy. And no, this isn't always true, right? There are like plants, flora, whatever, fauna, whatever we call it, lives out in the wild and grows and reproduces just on its own. So I don't, whatever. There's exceptions. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think you'll track with me. In general, there is this idea that if you want to grow a seedling, when you grow it, if you put it outside too early into the wind and the rain and the storm and the sun, whatever, you can essentially kill it because the seedling is so weak still and just starting to grow. It's too much. It's too intense. But on the flip side, if you don't get that seedling out there transferred by a certain point, then it will die because it's too weak, because the seedling actually needs the rain and the wind and the sun and the storms to help it shoot its roots down deeper and become a stronger plant. And so I just got chills. I don't think there's any specific number or age anyone can give you. I think that it is between you and the Lord and your children. Every child has a different personality, a different way of processing things, different developmental pace. I don't believe, and this is part of my belief around homeschooling either, that there is a certain rate at which every child should unfold in their development. I don't think that every child will or should be reading by the exact same age or be at a certain mathematical level. Now, part of that is not only because I believe in developmental differences and like the rates at which they develop, part of that is because I believe every child has different strengths. Every person has different strengths. So I think it's unfair and unrealistic and not wise to expect the same development from every person at the same age. So I think praying for discernment and having real conversations with your children that are age appropriate, using language that is best able to convey certain morals and perspectives to them is important. But I think it has to be done at the right time, like back to that seedling analogy. I mentioned us living in a community that is very conservative and very Christian, and I think that that's awesome. I know some people feel called to cities, and once again, every family is different. People are different. I recognize that. There's a nuance in every community and family dynamic. But I will say, I think that it is extremely worthwhile. Even if you're in a city, right? You can do this through a church. I think it is beyond worthwhile. I think it's of the utmost importance if we're trying to raise children who care about truth, to surround ourselves with other believers, with other Christians, with a like-minded community where they can have these conversations with people who believe in the same moral values. They can openly discuss their faith and maybe the things that they're struggling with, and they have support other than just mom and dad. I mean, on that same note, that's also why I think it's important, if possible, to live like intergenerationally, to be close to family. I know we live in a society now that hasn't really supported that or encouraged that or made that very easy for a lot of reasons. But once I had my son, it really occurred to me how important it personally felt to be near some family. I wanted my son and any future children to know that I was not the only matriarch in their life while they were growing up. They had another mom-like figure, they have another dad-like figure. And always, right, we don't control things. It is what it is. It's not possible for everyone for a lot of different reasons, but I always want to plant this out there because this was something that didn't really occur to me till I had kids, not only because of my son, but also because of the thoughts and ideas that other people were planting in my life, how important and useful and helpful and necessary and life-giving it would be to be near family as we raise children. And so having other people talk about that really made a big impact on me. And I honestly think that that is part of the reason why a lot of children are being swayed towards worldviews that are false or evil because they don't have the extended family. They don't have anyone with age and wisdom to speak into their lives. And I think that's true about parents as well. This idea, I think it was Abigail Schreier who said this, that because families are not living intergenerationally, there is this anxiety epidemic amongst young parents because they don't have older parents who are able to look back and be like, oh, yeah, I went through that. You're going to be fine. Or trust me, this is going to go by so fast, like absorb this, or whatever wisdom an older person is going to give you. But I think we are lacking something that is affecting society by not choosing to stay close with our family. Practically speaking, I think it's really important as parents that we develop, I don't like this phrase, but actually it's the perfect phrase. I just don't like it because I feel like it tends to get like weaponized by people that are more on the left side of the political spectrum. But this phrase, media literacy, I agree with them. When I hear people talk about this, I'm like, yes, media literacy. And what I mean by that is a couple of things. First off, when you see Instagram posts, do not take them at face value. Is that obvious? I think it's obvious. Take to the interwebs, do some searching, find some credible websites. Here's the thing. It's the internet, right? And it's all like information you're taking from other people. So you really never know, but you want to do your due diligence. When you research something and you fact check it, you want to see, are you on a government page? That's take it for what you want it to be. We could call it a reputable situation. But at that point, if it's a government page, it's funded by the public. It's, funded by tax dollars. If it's another type of site, whatever site it is, you want to find out, where did that funding come from? How did they pay for this study? How long has this study been going on? You basically just want to ask a lot of questions, and you want to follow those questions. Another thing is, if you're getting information and news, you want to make sure you are essentially getting it, or fact checking, once again, from multiple different vantage points. So the most basic there's nuance to this, and there's a bajillion publications out there, but this is, the easiest. You'll be like, oh, that's what you mean. If you're going to read something on Fox News, you want to read about it on CNN as well. You know what I mean? There are actually services that offer this, where they basically try to make sure that you're getting coverage from like both sides, though I think there's lots of sides to a story, but both sides of the story. I think that's very important. And practicing media literacy for yourself and then conveying to your children how you practice media literacy is, I think, how you pass that along. Like, so much of parenting, I don't believe in this idea that you can be the perfect parent or the best parent or however your kids turn out is because of you. I don't believe in that, because I think ultimately everybody is their own person. Your children are their own people. Like, you can do all of the right things in a garden, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes a crop just doesn't flourish. Something's wrong with the seeds, the weather, whatever. Like, there's a lot of factors there. But I do think that obviously the things that we do have a great impact. And so we are called to do our due diligence to make sure that we are trying to set our children up to love the truth. And so if we're trying to set our children up to love the truth, then we need to love the truth, and we need to pursue the truth and then share with them how we pursued it, how we got to those points, why we believe those things, and how they can grapple. I feel like I've used that word a lot in this video, but grapple with these concepts for themselves. Pray for discernment, guys. Man, pray for discernment and plug in to a community of people that you feel like is also pursuing truth and wisdom and discernment in these crazy times. It can be a specific group, like a church. It can be a group of friends that you've gathered together. Maybe you're doing a study. Maybe you guys meet regularly. It doesn't have to be one particular thing, though I do think a church is a great way to do that, because you have a recurring visit with these people every week where you are all being fed spiritually. In my mind, I think the moral of all of this is that we are not powerless. We ultimately are not in control. God is in control, but we are not powerless. We are called to equip our children with their own discernment, with wisdom, with knowledge. We are called to pray over our children for their future, for their hearts, for their salvation. But we cannot control them. That's actually something that, yes, I think how people's children turn out says something about the parents, but also because ultimately every person is their own person, I think that only goes so far. And I think that it's important for you to remember that, because, there's all these conversations around mom guilt, which is a separate conversation I'm not going to get into now, but if you want me to talk about mom guilt at some point, you can let me know in the comments. You can let me know in the comments what you think in general about topics that I'm going to discuss in the future, because I feel like I'm in a mood again to talk with you guys about things. But what I was going to say is, I think that part of this idea around mom guilt is that we control the outcome of our children, how smart they are, how talented they are, how kind they are. And while, yes, I do think children absorb a lot of what we put out for them, what we model for them. I do not believe that it's just, do this, you will get this, do this, you will get that. And so there's an element of you that you have to release that feeling of guilt to the Lord. And you have to say, all right, God, I am imperfect. Guide me. Please give me discernment, give me wisdom, and help me to steward the blessing of my kids, Lord, that you gave me. Ultimately, they are yours, but you put them in my, what's the word? Not possession, in my home, it's my job to steward them, in my stewardship. I don't know the word I'm looking for. Our job is to love them and to teach them and equip them to face ideas head on and not be afraid of the truth. That is something that I wrestled with probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, where I was actually on YouTube when I kind of came to this point, because once I came on YouTube, it was really when I was confronted for the first time in detail with tons of different worldviews. People were throwing them my direction, and I was really scared. I was scared because I really believed what I believed, but I didn't know how to answer all of these thoughts, all of these questions, all of these challenges of my worldview and my faith. And I remember where I was when I came to the conclusion that I just want to pursue truth, and that I don't need to be afraid to wrestle with these ideas and search for truth, even if it was different than what I believed in the first place, because ultimately I believe that God is a God of truth. And so I don't need to be afraid of that. And I think that that is what we need to instill in our children, a desire for truth, a desire to love the Lord and let him use us in our lives to love other people and not be afraid to live out truth and proclaim the truth when it is the right time, necessary, whatever, you get my gist. So yeah, what a crazy week. I will say this, Charlie Kirk's death should not be, and I talked about this a little bit in my last video, but it should not be the death of debate. It should be a wake-up call to encourage us to want to pursue truth and to want to wrestle with ideas. Because if we don't do it at home, our kids will do it out there. And they're going to do it out there anyways once they're grown up and they've spread their wings and flown. But I think that the home is the place to do it first. If nothing else, for the encouragement of maintaining a relationship with our children and letting them know that we care about truth, that we care about them. So that is it, guys. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments, and I will, God willing, see you back here soon with another new video. Bye, guys.